Well, it's finally here, guys. The long-awaited Greenskins Overhaul. And by Gork and Mork, did they ever need it? The orcs and goblins languished in misery for far too long, procrastinating their mushroom tips for turn after turn in the vain hope that one day they might actually replenish their armies. Their skill trees suffered from Game 1 syndrome, their mechanics were kinda uninspired and gifted to other races, their iconic lords were memes, and Thorgrim's Dawi Tide has been giving them wedgies for the better part of a year. Overall, they just kinda felt like a chore to play, at least in comparison to the chads of Game 2, but not anymore. As promised, the Warden and the Paunch DLC is launching alongside a massive free update to the Greenskins campaign. So in this video, we're gonna go through and highlight a lot of the changes you'll experience yourself come May 21st. And to get things kicked off, in case you missed it, the free LC mount has already been announced, and it is indeed the Catchweb Spider Shrine Ragnarok for the Great Goblin Shaman. Don't think anyone guessed that correctly. I know I certainly didn't. I was very much on the Griffin train for the High Elves. But yeah, out of left field and spinning webs of woe, this monster turns one of the squishiest lords in Mortal Empires into one of its tankiest, with almost 7,000 HP and 150 armor to boot. Loses a bit of health and melee attack compared to your standard Ragnarok Spider, but grants a cost and cooldown reduction to spells from the Little WAAAGH. And as if to raise a middle finger salute to the High Elves and their incredibly annoying spell called Arcane Unforging, Shamans got their own version called Don't Even Try It, that on average will deal about 700 damage to an enemy lord or hero and put their abilities on cooldown for 15 seconds. Now, while we're on the subject of spiders, I'm sorry to say you still cannot climb over walls in sieges, but Swift Stride has been reworked to allow unfettered movement through forests, as in your gigantic monsters, your cav, and your lords will completely ignore trees if they have the Swift Stride ability, rather than trying to path around them, which is a subtle but pretty important change overall when it comes to unit movement, and allows units with Strider to make full use of the ability when hiking through the woods. This is going to have a bigger impact on your battles than you might otherwise think, but at the very least, it's a really nice quality of life change. Should allow Queen Mama Shelob to hunt much more efficiently on her way to Spider's Cleft. Now on the campaign map, WAAAGH, Confederations, and Resources have been entirely overhauled from the ground up, and we're getting a lot more toys to play with here. The Greenskins now have Norscan-style Confederations, so if you defeat a lord like WAAAGH or Skarsnik, you can choose to automatically absorb their faction into your Jolly Green Empire, which means you can expand incredibly quickly if you're actively seeking out other tribal leaders. Now, that might not always be the best way to build up your provinces and protect your borders, but it does mean your snowball and the snowball of Greenskin AI can get rolling out of control hyper quick if that's how you want to play it. And I think you'll notice as we go through these changes, that's really where the emphasis is being placed here, on quickly building and then maintaining a ton of momentum until you become this unstoppable juggernaut, which is pretty thematic when you're talking about the Green Tide. Now, the trade-off is that standard confederations through diplomacy are now much more difficult, but there's really no better race in Warhammer for this kind of mechanic, where if you beat a lord, they become part of your faction. And if you like playing Pokemon with legendary lords, beating them in battle is an exceptional way to catch them all. Now, I know a lot of you guys have been asking about the Immortals, and no, they are not a regiment of renown now, but they might as well be at this point. They're still technically a banner. You still put them on your starting unit for Black Orcs with Grimgor at the beginning of your campaign, but Jesus Christ, dude. These guys are insane now. They are insane. They cannot lose models while their leadership is above 50%, which is always because they're immune to Psych, and they get buffed into the stratosphere by Grimgor. And they're obviously beasts in melee anyway, so they are functionally immortal now, as their name might imply. They are always fighting at max strength, and they will blend anything that gets in their way. Through 55 turns of a very hard Grimgor campaign, they've killed more than 5,000 enemies and not yet lost a single model. Not a single one. It's an infinite KD, dude. It's absolutely ridiculous. Which brings us to the new Greenskins Resource, which ties into this whole thing, and this resource is called Scrap. When you crump gits in Warhammer 2 with the Green Tide, they drop bits, and you can fashion these scraps of armor and weapons into equipment for your tribe that can dramatically buff your melee capabilities for each of your units. Black Orcs can get a big armor boost, bonus versus large or bonus versus infantry, Orc boys can get a huge missile block chance or weapon damage, and each unit archetype has 2 or 3 choices to pick from. It's a little bit underdeveloped right now. I mean, the framework is good, it's just that there's an illusion of choice for quite a few of them, where you'll pretty much have an automatic go-to that's clearly better than the alternatives. It could use a bit more refining and a bit more variety, but the idea itself is solid, and it's thematic. It's also going to be used to research parts of the tech tree as well, which has been entirely reworked. Many of us felt like casualty replenishment was one of the biggest issues facing their campaign. It's just not fun to play end turn simulator waiting for the endless green tide to have maybe the worst troop replacement speed in the entire game. Made no sense whatsoever. They're a limitless race. There should be millions of them, so the fact that it took so long to replenish never really made any sense. But thankfully, that has been fixed. There's a 10% casualty replenishment tech really early in the tree. Their base replenishment seems to have been improved as well, and in 100 turns spread across 3 different campaigns, I've not had any issues with replenishing losses after a battle whatsoever. They've got public order bonuses, 2 new legendary war bosses with unique traits, and a whole bunch of other stuff as well. I'm not going to read through it all here. You can pause the video as I mouse through if you really want to see everything, but probably the biggest change for the Greenskins is how WAAAGH functions. You no longer have a fightiness meter that builds up per army. It's a faction-wide resource that gives bonuses and penalties as you work your way through the gauge. When you're a bottom feeder, you have massive debuffs map-wide, but this really isn't much of an issue as long as you're occasionally winning battles. You'll get growth, public order, and better recruitment as the meter builds until finally you can call a WAAAGH on a specific settlement. And this is almost exactly like the Crusade mechanic from Medieval 2, only this time you don't have a 15th century kid diddler telling you an invasion of England is verboten. Unlike previous patches, there won't be an AI army that spawns right next to you. Your main stack will become a parent army that carries the WAAAGH with it as it grows, and depending on the region you're in, or the region you're moving through, you'll get unique units that reflect the campaign map as well. So, if you're near a volcano, you'll get lava-themed monsters. If there are wyverns flying overhead, you might tame some feral wyverns for your WAAAGH, and if there are boars walking around on the campaign map, you'll likely get some boar cav as well. So this functionally becomes a 40-stack army once the WAAAGH is finished building, and it'll take 3 or 4 turns for it to build up to that 20 stack. CA have actually added a feature that lets you gift control of the WAAAGH to the AI on the battlefield itself if you don't like microing 40 stack armies, which a lot of people don't. I won't use it myself, but I think a lot of people will. It's a good feature to have for sure. Or if you want, you can just play it normally like a 40 stack battle. Now, when you build the WAAAGH meter up to 100 and call it in, you can dedicate the Crusade to either Gork or Mork, and then depending on how powerful the faction is you declared it on, you'll get different level trophies with rewards that scale accordingly. Remember, these are Greenskins. There's no fun to be had in crumping little weaklings. They want to fight the best of the best, so the bonuses you get from beating, say, the 50th ranked faction are going to be much less than the bonuses you'll get from a successful WAAAGH against a top-ranked faction. And your ultimate reward for capturing and defending the settlement till the conclusion of your quest is a special trophy that grants map-wide bonuses until you embark on another one. They're a bit ADHD. It's on to the next one and forget the past, even if the past was like 5 minutes ago. Now, a couple things to note here. There's a substantial movement penalty when you call a WAAAGH. Like, you're stripped of any movement bonuses your army might have accrued from followers, from your skill trees, or the tech tree itself. You're stuck with the movement range of the army that's following you, which is base movement, which is very slow, which means getting to faraway locations or enemy capitals can take way too long. Not really how a momentum-based Crusade mechanic should function, but I think that will get changed. On the first patch we played with, I could actually shift special units from my WAAAGH into my main army and keep them there, but the WAAAGH cost upkeep and quickly put me in the red economically. And in the current patch, it appears that WAAAGHs don't cost upkeep whatsoever, but you cannot shift special units like Wyverns or the Lava Spiders over to your main stack. On the one hand, WAAAGH is a limited resource that can only be earned after fighting a bunch of battles, and it represents the Greenskin tribes rallying to my side because I'm the biggest, I'm the meanest, and I'm the greenest. They aren't joining my horde to get paid, they're joining it because I'm the boss, and they want a good scrap. So it's the correct call to not make WAAAGH armies cost any upkeep. They shouldn't cost upkeep. On the other hand, you now can't exchange units, so ultimately, I don't know what the final implementation of this will be like. There's still going to be a lot going on behind the scenes as they listen to our feedback and do their own testing, but I'll be curious to see what their final implementation ends up being. My proposal is that you should be able to exchange units from the WAAAGH to your main stack, but if you do, you obviously need to start paying upkeep for it. So if I get a badass lava spider that costs 550 gold a turn, I can leave it in the WAAAGH so it doesn't cost anything, because WAAAGH armies don't cost upkeep, but it'll then disband as soon as I've conquered my prize, or I can move it to my main stack, but then I'd have to pay for it every single turn. WAAAGH in battle is new as well. It's an army ability now, similar to Murderous Prowess, in that it builds on the meter up top as combat unfolds, but it can still be used multiple times per battle. So it's like Murderous Prowess, but you've got multiple uses of it. And each legendary lord, from Skarsnik to Grimgor, has their own unique variation and traits that make their WAAAGH special. WAAAGHs can cause terror, Grimgor's grants even bigger melee buffs, and so on. And speaking of WAAAGH, the Slaughterer now has his own start position, a unique one up north, much closer to Troll Country. He begins his playthrough in Karak Ungor with a gold mine, just north of Ungrim Ironfist and Karak Kadrin in the Slayer Keep, slanging and banging in a newly reworked World's Edge Mountains with a few new Karaks to take control of as well. He's got a really unique and interesting start position there, right on the doorstep of the Vampire Counts, of the Chaos Invasion, and the Empire as well. You are going to be fighting a lot of Imperial stacks in those first 100 turns. Like all legendary lords for the Greenskins, he has had his skill tree completely reworked. Gets a Gaze of Nagash bounce spell from the Crown of Sorcery, and Wind of Death at the end of his unique line, which is extremely powerful, but I don't think you can overcast it, which is a bit unfortunate, but makes some sense. He can only get access to Fate of Buna and Purple Sun once he's completed the Crown of Nagash quest battle. And as promised, Grimgor is a beast now. Be afraid. Be very afraid. Bunch of new dueling abilities that will make him a lot scarier in a drag-it-out melee grind. Best of the Best gives him melee defense and a ward save when lords or heroes approach him. And Your Next basically gives him Hunter of Champions from Wulfric the Wanderer. Paralyzing Stare that severely debuffs enemy characters on the way in. And his Bloodforged armor now knocks back enemies so he can push through a melee grind and keep himself from being surrounded. So think of Queek Headtaker's Verminous Valor. Quite like that, but it deals some damage as well. And on top of all that stuff, there are a bunch of unique units available in WAAAGH armies. Supa Squigs are squiggly bloated corpses that suicide bomb themselves and can one-shot pretty much any infantry unit in the game. Feral Wyverns will indeed join your crusades here too. I know a lot of people were asking for those. Feral Wyverns are a unit, and they're going to give you some aerial presence and some terror, which is always useful. No breath attacks though, they're not dragons. And the Lava Spider Rider units are probably the most interesting of the entire bunch. The Spider Riders have armor piercing and flaming damage, which is a nice combo on a horse archer type unit with Parthian shot. And the Queen Mama Fire Beast has two unique abilities that will make her pretty much a go-to in any army. Thermal Thorax deals damage in a constant radius around her as she melts armor and skin with radiant heat. And Arachneruption is just what it sounds like, baby. A volcanic explosion that demolishes densely packed infantry if they try and surround her. Hands down, one of the coolest additions in the Greenskins update. You're going to love the Lava Spiders. They are a really, really good addition and give a unique flavor to those volcanic regions in the Badlands and up north. And that's pretty much it. It's a lot to digest, I know. There's plenty more to talk about on this front. Could be at it all day, but that should give you a pretty good overview of what to expect for the Greenskins Overhaul on May 21st. I will have plenty more to show in the next couple days as we do some streaming and the next set of embargoes begins dropping. Hope you guys enjoyed this first look at the Greenskins Overhaul, and be sure to check back every single day as we delve deeper into the content for the Warden and the Paunch, coming soon to a Steam near you. Stay green, stay lean, and I'll see you all in the next video.